This video is going to go through lesson 2.7, where we're going to be writing proofs using properties of special angle pairs. These special angle pairs we're already pretty familiar with, so if you look at the different theorems, you don't need to remember the theorem number or the postulate number or anything like that, but you do need to know what they say. So if you know what a right angle is, you won't have too much problem with that. Supplementary angles, complementary angles, these are the special angle pairs that we're talking about. Linear pairs, we've talked about those a long time ago now. Vertical angles as well. So if you look at the theorems, all right angles are congruent. Okay, we know that because they're all 90 degrees. And theorem 2.4 says that congruent supplements theorem if two angles are supplementary, which means if two angles equal 180 degrees, and if they're supplementary to the same angle or to congruent angles, then they are congruent. Congruent complements theorem says if two angles are complementary, so if the two angles add up to 90 degrees and they're complementary to the same angle or to congruent angles, then those angles are congruent. Postulate 12, linear pair postulate. If two angles form a linear pair, we missed our R here. Linear pair, remember those are the ones that are shaped like the letter Y, and in a very rare form they would form a letter T, but linear pair angles are supplementary. Again, they add up to 180 degrees. Vertical angles, the theorem says that vertical angles are congruent, and those are the ones that are formed in an X. So the two angles that are across from each other, these two are going to be congruent, and then of course the other two here are also congruent. So just a reminder about all those different terms that you learned, back in Unit 1, but we are going to be using them now to write some proofs. So in example 1, it says find the angle measures. So you should be pretty good at this because we've done quite a bit of this kind of work before. It says here, complete the statement given that the measure of angle AGF is equal to 90 degrees. Well, here's angle AGF. And remember that when we see a diagram, it's always a good idea to mark it up. So I've marked it with the 90-degree angle. And so if they give us this information, so this is given to us, we need to find the measure of angle CGD. All right, CGD is this angle here. And if we look real carefully, it looks like that kind of forms a vertical angle. So in other words, this angle AGF and this angle CGD would be the exact same measure. So let's just go ahead and write in 90 degrees. And then we need to explain. When we explain, we can say that angle CGD is vertical to angle AGF. Therefore, and I'm not sure if we've used these three dots before, but three dots in a triangle form like this means therefore it is 90 degrees. And we know that right angles are equal to each other, so that was one of the theorems here as well. That's theorem 2.3. Again, you don't need to remember the number, but remember that all right angles are congruent. And then also theorem 2.6, vertical angles are congruent. So that's what we have there in part A. Let's take a look at part B. If the measure of angle BGF is 113, so here's BGF. Okay, so we're talking about this angle that I've highlighted in red. If it's 113 degrees, then we need to find the measure of DGE. So we're going to find the measure of DGE, which is this angle over here where I'm putting the question mark. Now that angle actually is vertical to the angle called BGA. So if angle BGA is this angle over here, then I know that the vertical angle is going to be the same measure as BGA. So how can I find out what BGA is, since I know that I want to say, well, these two are vertical? All right, well, I know that this one is 90 degrees, and if I have a measure of 113 for this big arc, then I can just subtract 90 from 113. So my explanation is going to be VGF equals 113, and we already know that FGA, or at the top of the page here, it says that AGF equals 90. I'm going to have to put a little angle sign in there. Therefore, those three dots, angle BGA is 23 degrees. Okay, so I know that the black shaded angle is 23 degrees, and the angle with the question mark in it, DGE, which is the one we're looking for. Remember, we're trying to solve for DGE. DGE is vertical to the angle that is 23 degrees. And so I'm going to say that angle DGE is vertical to angle BGA, and therefore angle DGE is 23 degrees. Okay, so we have our explanation. We've used some theorems, terminology that we know makes sense for this diagram, and also we've also shown some work here. So we have to do this now also for the on your own. If you take a look at the next picture, the diagram at the top with the instructions say that these two angles equal 90 degrees. So I would mark that on the diagram for yourself. So angle BHD, that's this angle here, is 90 degrees. Even though it doesn't really look like it, make sure that you mark it as a 90-degree angle. And also CHE. So CHE is this angle right here that is 90 degrees. So as long as you know those two, you should be able to solve for the other angles that they're asking for. And it doesn't ask you to give any explanation, but you do need to know why in order to be able to solve for the different measures. Okay, last on this side of the paper, we're going to look at example number 2. And in this diagram, it says that BGD is 90, so I'm going to mark that. And I'm also going to mark that CGD is 26. Now it's asking us to find the measure of angle 1, the measure of angle 2, and the measure of angle 3. Well, what kind of angles are BGC and CGD? Looks like those are complementary since we just marked them with the 90-degree angle on them. So we'll say that these are complementary, which means they add up to 90 degrees. And so if they're complementary, what's the measure of angle 1? Just this part. Well, I can subtract the 26, so 90 minus 26, because that little tiny angle called CGD is 26. So that means my final answer is going to be 64. Now if we look at angle AGB and BGD, so I'm going to use my black pen for that. So it's going to be AGB, this angle here, and BGD. Now we already know that BGD is 90, so therefore this one has to be 90 as well, doesn't it? Okay, so if there's two 90-degree angles, those are going to add up to 180, and we know that 180-degree angles are called supplementary. So that means the measure of angle 2, which is the angle also called AGB, is going to be 90 degrees. 180 minus 90, which was marked for BGD. That means that the angle next to it on the same line is 90 degrees as well. All right, our last one says AGF. So let's go ahead and take a look at AGF. That's this angle number 3. Angle AGF, and CGD, which we already talked about was 26 degrees, are what kind of angles? Well, it forms a letter X, doesn't it? So if it forms a letter X, those are going to be called vertical. And vertical angles, as the theorem says, are congruent. So that means that the measure of angle 3, this angle here, also called AGF, is 26 degrees because they are exactly congruent since they are vertical angles. Let's go ahead and take a look at the back of the page. The first two problems here, the on your own problems, number 6 and 7, are a continuation of the previous picture. So you have the same picture, the same information. It looks like to me they're telling us here again that BGD is 90 degrees and this angle here was 26. So now you're in charge of finding the measure of angle FGE. Okay, and that information, if you look at the previous problem that we were working on, you might get a hint from that. And then we also need you to find this measure DGE here. And it does say explain. So when you're giving your answer, please make sure you explain why. So is it vertical? Is it supplementary to something? And make sure you name that thing that it's vertical to or supplementary to or complementary to. So just make sure you give some additional information. Don't just write a number down there. And then for example number 3, we're going to actually add some algebra in here. It says solve for x in the diagram. If you take a look at angle AEB and BEC, they actually form a linear pair. Okay, so BEC, and look, they do form a letter Y. If you look at it kind of on the side there, the letter Y is on its side. So this line, AEC, is 180 degree angle, a straight angle, and so those two angles are forming a linear pair. And linear pairs sum up to 180 degrees. So we can solve for x because if 25 plus this other angle have to add up to 180, that means that 2x plus 3 plus 25 equals 180. Okay, remember they're not equal to each other. This angle right here is much larger than the angle that's 25 degrees. If you take away 25, you can find out how much that angle is equal to, and that would be 155. So remember not to set them equal if it's a linear pair. Alright, so the next step would just be combining the things that are alike. So 2x plus 28 equals 180. And then I'm going to subtract 28 from both sides. Neither one of these things has an x with it. So now I have 2x equals 152. And then if I divide by 2, here and here, x is going to equal 76. Okay, so just make sure you show your work. You're going to do this same kind of work with numbers 8 and 9. Again, let's take a look at what number 8 asks us to do. It says solve for x in the diagram. So if we're looking at the diagram, you can see here that JNK is an angle and KNL is an angle that's adjacent to it. So you have to determine how to set that equation up. For number 9, I would like you to make a slight alteration to this problem. So what I would like you to do is get rid of the 42 here. Okay, so we're going to get rid of the 42 and we're going to make this angle here 138 degrees. Alright, so now you have a little bit of a different setup than you did for number 8, but you can see that you have an angle here that you're trying to solve for, and then you're going to need to use that information of 138 degrees across from that. So go ahead and set up a problem and then also work it out and solve for x. So I'll be looking for your 2 answers. I'll also be looking for the work for each of those problems as well as the other on your own problems that you were asked to do. If there are any questions, please make sure you write those down so that you can get those answered in class.